When 38-year-old Karen Stevens marched into Frank Caprio's courtroom demanding to speak to his manager and screaming about her constitutional rights, everyone thought they were witnessing another typical entitled outburst, but what this furious woman was really trying to hide would make Frank Caprio ask the most savage question of his career, leaving her completely speechless and exposing the truth that would ruin her forever. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to subscribe. Also, drop a comment and let me know which city you're watching from. I'd love to see where everyone is tuning in from. Judge Frank Caprio had dealt with difficult defendants before, but nothing could have prepared him for what was about to storm into his Providence Municipal Court on this particular Tuesday morning. Karen Stevens, 38 years old, burst through the courtroom doors like a hurricane of entitlement, her perfectly styled blonde hair bouncing with each aggressive step. "This is absolutely ridiculous," she shouted before even reaching the defendant's podium. "I demand to speak to whoever is in charge here." Frank looked up from his paperwork, already feeling his patience being tested. "Ma'am, I am Judge Frank Caprio, and I am in charge of this courtroom. Please approach the bench respectfully." Karen strutted forward in her designer heels, waving a stack of papers like weapons. "Judge, this whole situation is a complete joke. I'm being persecuted for exercising my constitutional rights." Frank glanced at her file. Multiple citations for blocking traffic during protests, disturbing the peace, and resisting arrest. "Miss Stevens, you're here for blocking traffic on Westminster Street during rush hour. How do you plead?" "I plead innocent," she screamed, her voice echoing through the courtroom. "This is America. I have the right to free speech." But what she said next made Frank's blood boil. "Miss Stevens, while you do have the right to free speech, you don't have the right to block traffic and prevent people from getting to work, medical appointments, or emergencies." Karen rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh, please. These people can wait 5 minutes while I exercise my constitutional rights. My cause is more important than their little inconveniences." Frank felt his jaw tighten. "Their little inconveniences? Miss Stevens, you blocked an ambulance for 12 minutes. "So what?" Karen snapped. "The person in that ambulance should have planned better. Besides, my protest was about saving lives too." The courtroom gasped. Frank had to grip his gavel to control his temper. "Miss Stevens, are you seriously suggesting that someone having a heart attack should have planned better?" Karen flipped her hair arrogantly. "Look, Judge, I'm fighting for women's rights here. That's bigger than one person's medical emergency." This is where Frank Caprio's legendary control began to crack. Frank stood up slowly, his voice dangerously quiet. "Miss Stevens, let me make sure I understand your position. You believe your protest is more important than emergency medical care?" "Absolutely. Social justice doesn't wait for convenient timing." Karen pulled out her phone and started filming. "I'm live streaming this persecution to my 50,000 followers. They need to see how the patriarchal court system silences women." Frank's voice rose. "Miss Stevens, put that phone away immediately. You're in a court of law, not a social media studio." "You can't silence me," Karen screamed. "This is fascism. My followers have a right to see this." Frank signaled to the bailiff. "Remove her phone immediately." As the bailiff approached, Karen became even more hysterical. "This is exactly the kind of oppression I'm fighting against. You're proving my point." Frank's next question would expose everything. Once Karen's phone was confiscated, Frank leaned forward with deadly focus. "Miss Stevens, I have one question for you, and I want a straight answer." Karen crossed her arms defiantly. "What?" "On the day you blocked traffic for 12 minutes, causing that ambulance delay, do you know what happened to the patient inside?" Karen shrugged dismissively. "No, and frankly, I don't care. One person doesn't outweigh the movement." Frank's voice became ice cold. The patient was Maria Rodriguez, a 34-year-old mother of 3, who was having a massive heart attack. Karen's defiance wavered slightly. "Well, that's unfortunate. Miss Stevens, Maria Rodriguez died because the delay prevented doctors from performing emergency surgery in time." The courtroom erupted in gasps. Karen's face went pale. That's not my fault." But Frank wasn't finished destroying her yet. "Miss Stevens, Maria Rodriguez wasn't just any victim. She was a nurse at Rhode Island Hospital who had spent the last 10 years saving other people's lives." Karen's voice cracked. "I didn't know. She was also a single mother working double shifts to support her 3 children, ages 6. Karen started backing away from the podium. "Judge, you can't blame me for..." Frank's voice thundered through the courtroom. "Those 3 children are now orphans because you decided your protest was more important than their mother's life." Karen began hyperventilating. This isn't fair, I was fighting for women's rights. Miss Stevens, you killed a woman while claiming to fight for women. Do you see the insane irony in that? The revelation that came next shattered Karen completely. Frank pulled out another document. But here's what you really need to know, Miss Stevens. I've done some research into your background. Karen's eyes widened with terror. What kind of research? Your social media posts, your employment history, your real motivations for these protests. Frank's voice dripped with disgust. Miss Stevens, you're not a women's rights activist. You're an unemployed attention seeker who discovered that protests get you social media followers. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. That's not I am fighting for. Miss Stevens, 6 months ago you were protesting for the exact same policies you're now protesting against. You switched sides based on which got more online engagement. The courtroom murmured in shock. You don't care about women's rights. You care about internet fame. And Maria Rodriguez died for your Instagram followers. Karen's world collapsed in real time. Karen fell into the defendant's chair, sobbing uncontrollably. Judge, please. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. But someone did get hurt, Miss Stevens. Someone died. And her children will grow up without a mother because you needed content for social media. Frank pulled out photos. These are Maria's children at her funeral. Look at them, Miss Stevens. Karen couldn't look at the photos. I can't. Look at them, Frank commanded. Look at what your selfishness cost. Karen glanced at the photos and completely broke down. Oh God, what have I done? Frank's voice was merciless. You've destroyed a family for internet clout. That's what you've done. The sentence that would end Karen's delusion forever. Miss Stevens, here's my ruling. You will pay the maximum fine of $5,000 for each violation, totaling. Karen's head snapped up. $25,000? You will perform 1,000 hours of community service at Rhode Island Hospital, specifically in the emergency department, where you can see the real consequences of delayed ambulances. Your Honor, please. You will also personally apologize to Maria Rodriguez's children and establish a college fund for each of them with a minimum of $10,000 per child. Karen was hyperventilating. I don't have that kind of money. Then you'll get a job instead of playing activist on social media. But Frank's most devastating blow was still coming. Frank stood up and walked around his bench to face Karen directly. Miss Stevens, I'm also ordering a complete ban on your participation in any public protests for 2 years. You can't do that, freedom of assembly! You lost that right when your assembly killed someone. And if you violate this order, you'll face criminal charges for Maria Rodriguez's death. Karen was sobbing so hard she could barely speak. This will ruin my life. Your life? Frank's voice exploded. Maria Rodriguez doesn't have a life anymore because of you. The entire courtroom fell silent except for Karen's sobbing. Miss Stevens, your online activism career is over. Your followers will learn the truth about who you really are. And every day for the next 2 years, you'll remember that a good woman died because of your selfishness. The immediate aftermath was swift and brutal. Within hours of leaving the courtroom, Karen's social media world imploded. Video of her breakdown had been leaked online, and her 50,000 followers learned the truth about Maria Rodriguez's death. Her follower count plummeted to under 3,000 in 24 hours. Sponsors dropped her immediately. Other activist groups publicly denounced her. But the real reckoning came when she met Maria Rodriguez's children. 8-year-old Carlos looked up at Karen with eyes full of confusion and pain. Why did you stop the doctors from saving my mommy? Karen couldn't answer. She just cried. The community service that changed everything, Karen's 1,000 hours in the emergency department, were the hardest of her life. Every delayed ambulance, every family in crisis, every life or death situation showed her the real-world consequences of her actions. Dr. Patricia Williams, the ER director, didn't make it easy for her. Karen, do you see that woman crying in bed 3? Her husband is dying because their ambulance was delayed in traffic. Every minute counts here. Day after day, Karen witnessed real suffering, real emergencies, real families torn apart by delays and obstacles. I never realized, she told Dr. Williams after 3 months. I thought it was just about making a point. Making a point? Dr. Williams replied coldly. Maria Rodriguez was my friend. She saved hundreds of lives in this hospital. And you took her away from all of us. The children's forgiveness that broke her completely. After 6 months of community service, Karen had saved enough money to start the college funds for Maria's children. When she presented the first checks, 10-year-old Sofia Rodriguez looked at her seriously. Miss Karen, are you sorry you made the doctors late? Karen knelt down to Sophia's level, tears streaming. Yes, Sophia. I'm sorrier than I've ever been about anything in my life. 6-year-old Miguel stepped forward. Mommy always said sorry means you won't do it again. That's right, Miguel. I will never ever do anything like this again. Carlos, now 9, had been quiet through the exchange. Finally, he spoke. Miss Karen, Mommy would want us to forgive you, but I'm not ready yet. Karen nodded through her tears. I understand, Carlos. I don't deserve your forgiveness. The transformation that amazed everyone. By the end of her community service, Karen Stevens was a completely different person. She had gotten a full-time job as a hospital administrator and was pursuing a degree in emergency medical services. Karen has become one of our most dedicated advocates for ambulance access and emergency response. Dr. Williams reported to the court. She's helped us reduce response times by 15% through her traffic management initiatives. Karen had also started a foundation called Maria's Minutes, dedicated to ensuring emergency vehicles never face unnecessary delays. Every minute matters became her new motto, replacing her old attention-seeking slogans. The children who became her teachers. 2 years after the tragedy, Carlos Rodriguez finally forgave Karen. At his mother's memorial service, he approached her. Miss Karen, I've been watching you. You really changed. Karen hugged him carefully. Your mother's memory changed me, Carlos. Everything I do now is to honor her. Sophia, now 12, had become an advocate for emergency vehicle access in schools. Miss Karen taught us that being sorry means working hard to fix what you broke. Miguel, 8 years old, surprised everyone by asking Karen to speak at his school about the importance of emergency services. The full-circle moment that defined everything. 3 years after her courtroom humiliation, Karen Stevens returned to Frank Caprio's court, not as a defendant, but as an expert witness in a case involving protest permits and emergency access. Your Honor, Karen testified, based on my experience coordinating with emergency services, I recommend requiring all protests to maintain clear ambulance corridors. Frank studied the transformed woman before him. Miss Stevens, what qualifies you to make this recommendation? Judge, 3 years ago I was a selfish person who thought my cause was more important than other people's lives. I learned the hard way that real activism means protecting everyone, especially the most vulnerable. Karen pulled out a photo. This is Maria Rodriguez with her children. Every policy decision I make, I ask myself, would this protect families like theirs or put them at risk? The legacy that honors Maria's memory. Today, Karen Stevens is 41 years old and serves as the Emergency Access Coordinator for the City of Providence. Her protocols have been adopted by cities across the country, potentially saving thousands of lives. The Maria Rodriguez Emergency Access Foundation has raised over $500,000 for ambulance equipment and training programs. Most importantly, Maria's children have thrived despite their tragedy. Carlos is now 15 and wants to become an emergency room doctor. Sophia, 14, volunteers with the foundation. Miguel, 12, helps Karen speak at schools about emergency vehicle safety. The entitled woman who screamed about her rights learned that the greatest right is the right to life, and that true activism means protecting that right for everyone, not destroying it for social media fame. Frank Caprio keeps Karen's original citations in his desk drawer, now marked Dismissed, Life Lesson Learned, a reminder that sometimes the most self-centered people can become the most dedicated servants of others. Because Frank learned something that day that reinforced his deepest belief. The law isn't about winning arguments or getting attention, it's about protecting innocent people from those who would harm them, for selfish reasons. Karen still visits Maria's grave every month, bringing flowers and updates about the children's progress. She never posts about these visits on social media. Some acts of remembrance are too sacred for public consumption. Because sometimes the most important activism happens in silence, one life saved at a time.